Hi there. This week I ponder why climate action is practical core business, even in 2020. Joan and I are on a mission to help organizations manage climate risk and ensure business continuity. These are fancy words for a simple idea: surviving a crisis. When we don't keep an eye on developing risk, bad things happen. And that's a surefire way to stagger helplessly from one crisis to the next. And that's just bad for business. For most of my career, I worked on environmental issues. I made sure my employers didn't run afoul of regulations, and I identified new environmental risks. And that's how I started to work on climate change. I had identified it as a growing risk that threatened the survival of my employer. I was just doing my job, looking out for the interests of the company. But there was a snag. In those days, organizations ran environment departments because they didn't have a choice. They spent as little as possible on these groups, and there wasn't much chance of success in the organization as an environment person. So, folks cycled in and out of these positions, except for a few true believers. And eventually, I found myself managing climate change because one CEO agreed with me. And no, he wasn't an environment champion. He was just a practical, pragmatic businessman. And he saw a major strategic threat to the company. But then, the board replaced him with a fellow who didn't believe in climate change. The new guy felt any money spent on climate change was wasted, and he surrounded himself with folks that agreed. Climate action withered, programs and staff were cut, and things returned to business as usual for the environment team. For the first time, I heard the phrase, "That isn't core business." And that was always the reason given to me for denying funds for climate action. Now, this may sound like whining and whinching, but truly it isn't. I'd been an environment guy for a couple of decades by that point. I just saw this as an unfortunate return to the status quo. Now, as a business owner, I understand the urgency of dealing with day-to-day threats. If we ignore these things, our businesses won't survive to see tomorrow. But when our thinking stops there, we have a real problem. While we focus on day-to-day problems, new threats continue to spring up, and they hit us one after the other. We struggle to work our way out of crisis mode, and often we fail. We use precious resources to keep our boat afloat, while ignoring where the river is taking that boat, and eventually the boat runs aground. And then we blame the failure on the last crisis that hit us, the last straw. While we deal with the urgent financial and health crises of 2020, we still have to monitor for what's coming next. In fact, the experts warned us of a possible pandemic, and instead we chose to focus on business as usual, and we weren't prepared. In retrospect, a pandemic was bound to happen, but poor planning made things worse. Climate change continues to threaten us too. We see more frequent and more severe storms hit communities that are already reeling from COVID. Climate change just makes a bad situation worse. Folks don't make climate a priority until an event actually hits. But with planning, we can be better prepared, and we can take the edge off these disasters. Preparation ensures survival. It's basic continuity planning. Climate change is a strategic risk. We need to plan for it. Survival is core business, if we're to ensure we don't run aground when the next crisis comes along. We will get through 2020, but let's plan. Let's make climate action core business. Stay safe. Until next time.